Hello everyone, and welcome to this lecture on Python. In this video we're going to cover operations on strings. More specifically, we are going to cover string slicing and functions on strings. More specifically about the functions on strings is that we are going to cover len, which returns the length of a string, split, which will split the string with a provided delimiter, and we'll talk about that in more detail, and join, which will join a series of strings into one whole string. So let's start talking about string slicing. So if I have some string here, and I give it the value of hello world. If I would like to slice the whole string, meaning take a copy of it, one way of doing that is I can create another string, and I can say some string, and I can do this with the colon. I mean the square bracket operator here, and I provide a colon. So when I provide a colon, what this means is that I'm going to start from the beginning, the absolute beginning, which is 0, and I'm going to slice until the end, which is the length minus 1. Another way of saying that is this. Another string equals some string. On the left side of the colon, I'm going to provide the starting index, which is one way of slicing strings, and in the other I'm going to say the size. So we're going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Right, and the commented out string slice we'll talk about in more detail. But this right here on line 11, I take some string and I slice the entire thing. I slice from the entire beginning to the entire end, and I copy it over to another string. In general, how string slicing works is that when you have some sort of string, let's put that right here, you're going to have some sort of string, and you can provide a start condition, an end condition, and a step condition. Right, so you can omit different you can omit different pieces of this and be fine. Right, and if you omit some pieces, what'll happen is that it'll assume certain values. So start will assume to have a default value of 0. End will have a assumed value of the length of the string minus 1, and step will have a default value of 1. So when I have this here, when I execute this line in Python, I'm going to start at 0, I'm going to end at the length of the string minus 1, which is 11, and I'm going to have a step by 1. Because these are the default values, I slice the entire string. What's really nice about slicing strings this way is that I can omit any of them. So if I'd like to just copy world, I can say world string equals some string, and we'll say this is index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 until the end. So why don't we print the values of another string, and we print world string. So what we expect is that the first print statement should print hello world, and the second print statement should just print world. Let's run that code. Good. It is exactly like I thought it would be. So we have an example where, well, let's think about this. So here the start is going to be 6, which will start at index 6 of the string. It's inclusive, and we'll go up until the end. Right, so this should actually be 12. The ending is exclusive. The ending is exclusive. Right, so if I'd like to, I can do something like this and this should yield the same results. Right. And again, I had to add the 12 here because even though Hello World has a string size of 11, I mean, it has 11 indices, it has a length of 12. Right, so to make this more familiar, if we had a loop in C, I'd say for int I equals 0, or 6 in this case, I less than 12, I plus plus. Oh. This is the equivalent of this type of slicing. So with the start condition, it is inclusive. With the end condition, is exclusive. Right, but because I can just omit this to get the end of the string, I don't need that there. But let's say I just wanted to get hello. I can get hello string equals some string, and we'll start from the beginning up until the 6th index, right? Because this is the 6th index, it's going to be exclusive. And actually, I just want hello. I don't want the space. So I'm going to reduce that by 5. Reduce the number to 5. So 5, this is index 5. So it's going to be inclusive at the beginning, and it's going to go up until index 4. So why don't we print hello string and see what the result is. Excellent. We have hello here. Right, so we demonstrated when we want to slice the whole string, where we want to slice from some starting point up until the end of the string, and the case where we want to start from the beginning of the string and stop at a intermediate point in the middle of the string. Now let's look at another case. I'll call this thing string, and I'll slice some string in a weird way. So it'll be a string that, well, won't make too much sense. I'll say from 3 to 9. Okay, so we have a starting condition, which is somewhere in the middle, and we have an ending condition that's somewhere in the middle. And we're going to do this by a step of 1. So why don't we print thing string here, and what's the result? Low war. Yes, whatever that means. But the point here is that we have sliced some intermediate part of the string. And one other thing that we can do is that we can actually determine the step. So the step in all these is 1. So that means that every single string, every slice that we take increments by 1, every piece of the slice. So if I'd like to, well, let's say skip some slices, maybe I have some weird string that doesn't make too much sense, but I think if we slice it correctly, we can get some meaning out of it. Right, so this string doesn't make too much sense. So why don't we create a variable called first name. First name is going to be equal to of name, and we'll do this. I will say we'll start at 1, we'll end at 12, and we'll do a step of 2. So this means we're going to start at index 1, we'll end at index 11, including index 11, and we're going to skip every other index in between. So we'll grab indexes 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, then 11. Right? So this will be the first name of the string. Let's do post name. And we'll just say name. And you know what? I just want to grab the last two. I know if I want to grab the last two, I'll need to start at an index of -2 and go until the end of the string. Okay, then we'll need a last name. We'll need to get the last name. And that'll have to start, well, from the absolute beginning. And we want to get all the even names. So we'll do that. We'll use 10 and then we'll get every other one. So why don't we print the result of that? We'll say print first name, comma, post name, comma, last name. Now let's see the result of that. Our string is sliced correctly and has been correctly deciphered. Right, so you have a lot of power when it comes to slicing strings. You can determine how you'd like to slice strings, and while this executes a lot of control in how you can manipulate strings, its uses for the most part, you'll usually skip. You'll have a step of one or two. You might have to subsample some stuff, but for the most part, you'll usually have a step of one or two. The start and the end are totally beginning. You might want to grab, if you want to grab the first half of the data, you'll start at 0 and go to the end, to the length of your string divided by 2. Or if you want to start at the middle of your string, you can do length divided by 2 plus 1 and then end at the end of the string with a step of 1. Right? There's many ways for you to exercise control for this. And so now this will wrap up string slicing. So now why don't we talk about functions on strings? Something that's introduced here on line 10 is this, len. What len stands for is length, and what it'll do is that it'll grab the length of a string. So why don't we start printing lengths? So if I want to print, let's print the length of name, and let's make that a little bit easier on the eyes. Right, so this will grab the length of the variable name. Okay, which will, I think it'll be 13, 14. Why don't we run that to check? 14, very nice. Right, so this grabs the length of the string. And we can test it for our other variables. Why don't we get the length of some string? Its length is 12. Not too shabby. Okay, so I have hello and world, and you know what? Storing it in these two variables is kind of a pain. I have to be careful of the indices, and I do know that hello and world is separated by a space. So what if I could do something where I can split up these strings by different spaces? And you know what? Let's add another space here. Let's add another space, and let's go from there. So one function that I can call, I can make a sep string, stands for separated string, and I'm going to say, you know what, let's split up some string. So I'm going to call the method the split function, and I'm going to give it, let's see, well, actually I don't have to for this. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I can provide some sort of delimiter. And by default, split has a delimiter space. And actually, let's bring it up on there we go. So if I change sep, I can determine how I want to split my string. By default, it should be a space. Right, and that's shown here, white space. Oh, well, I just wanted to show that. Oops. Okay, so why don't we print sep string? Hey, look at that. So one thing that you might tell is that this is not a string, and you are correct if you make the observation. This is actually something called a list, and that is something that we're going to talk about in the next lecture. But what this will do is that it will separate a string into different components. Its default separator is a space. So it'll separate hello world and the exclamation point because there are two spaces. There are spaces in between these strings, and it'll associate them as three individual strings, and they'll get stored into a list, which we'll cover more details later, of three values inside of it, which is pretty nice. So another function that we can use is join. So now that our string is separated, we can use the join method. It's a method because it belongs to the class, right? Len is an independent function that takes an object as its input. However, split itself belongs to the string class. So if I'd like to, right here, I can say print, or we'll call this reunited string is equal to sep string dot join. Okay, we're gonna join. Actually, sorry, that's incorrect. A space and then dot join and then sep string. So what join will do is that it takes this string, which is a space, and this string will be inserted in between each item inside of sep string. So the join function will take this empty string, well, not empty, there's a space, and for every element inside of sep string, we're going to put a space in between each item, which is hello world and the exclamation point. We're going to make it one string, and in between each individual strings that have been separated, we're going to insert that space there. So if we go here and we print reunited string, well, what can we expect? Here we have hello world as the separate items, and if we run this, well, now it's all together, which is pretty great. And this concludes our introduction to operations on strings. Operations on strings are quite powerful, especially string slicing and the use of the len function. These two are actually quite abstract relative and are not just exclusive to strings. We can actually use these on the class that we're going to cover next, called a list, and it's quite nice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, which will cover lists.